The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Welcome to hour number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show. Here with you over the airwaves of ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 250 plus markets across the United States of America. Check your AM, FM listing nearest you, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM Channel 80, plus ESPN Radio simulcast over the live national television airwaves of ESPN News. 888-SAY. ESPN is always the number to call up. That's 888-729-3776. The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who switch and save pay an average of $699 less per year. Also, from the biggest concerts and games to the hottest theater shows and more, Vivid Seats has it all. Download the app and join the Vivid Seats Rewards loyalty program today. Ladies and gentlemen, weekly, I receive a treat. I have my man, my brother, a good friend of mine, great radio host, does a great job on college football. I think very, very knowledgeable about all things football. Love having him in here on a weekly basis, sitting right next to me during the college football and the NFL season, the one and only Paul Finebaum. What's going on, buddy? How you doing, man?
It is my pleasure. And Stephen A., I'll speak out of school. I'm in Houston, the Houston airport, about to catch a plane for Bristol.
Yep.
I'm trying to keep up with all the games, and all of a sudden I see a text from Stephen A. Smith. I'm going, mate, I wanted to say, TSA guy, hold on a second. I got to talk to this guy.
That's right. And I was texting you because I was in LA at the time, Saturday morning, and I woke up at 9 a.m. to watch Michigan, Wisconsin. I turned it off at the first half. I could not believe the way Michigan was getting obliterated. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, he's a stud. Please don't get me wrong. This kid that's running back out of Wisconsin, he's a stud. Big, strong, he's got speed with him, hits the holes real quickly. I like him a lot. Heisman Trophy candidate as far as I'm concerned. Who knows? But this guy had 143 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter.
And think about this. After the Army embarrassment, where Michigan survived in overtime,
2 weeks,
they had a bye week.
That's right.
And on the second play of the game, they had to call timeout because they weren't lined up correctly. Now, who do you blame? You want to blame?
That's coaching.
Yeah.
It's coaching. That's coaching. But put into perspective, listen, I know he works at another network, but Chris Carter is my brother. He'll always be my brother. He's a great NFL analyst. He's working for Fox Sports right now. He was at ESPN for years. I had an opportunity to watch him for a few minutes this morning. Obviously, he comes from the Ohio State. He was literally on national television cheering for Jim Harbaugh to keep his job just so Ohio State can continue to pile up wins against Michigan. That's how bad it is now, Paul.
But do you know the problem? For Michigan fans are not hungry to get rid of him because the previous 2 coaches were Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, and they still believe that Harbaugh is going to get them out of this. He's not. You know that. I mean, at 5th year, you just don't wave a I thought he was going to wave a magic wand and all this ineptitude and arrogance was going to go away. But I'm pretty convinced now it's not going to. So, if they were to get rid of him, then they have to think outside the box. And I don't think Michigan's capable of that.
Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Tell me this. Where did it go wrong? What has happened? Because remember, listen, a legitimate argument could be made that Jim Harbaugh's greatest victory at Michigan was a loss to Ohio State years ago when it came down to the wire.
Well, I'm not a stat guy, but last 3 games against ranked teams, which started with Ohio State, and by the way, that was they were playing for a shot at the playoffs last year. The bowl game against Florida and then the game Saturday, they've lost by 23, 26, and 21 points. So this year, things were going to change. I believed it, Stephen A. I sat here with you the other day saying, I really think this team, I don't know why I said that, but we're talking college football. Mm-hmm. Jim Harbaugh, he's had a very good defensive coordinator in Don Brown. He went out and got an offensive coordinator in Josh Gaddis, and he had never Nick Saban didn't want this guy to be his coordinator, but Jim Harbaugh said, I know more than Nick Saban. I'm going to bring this guy up here, and everything is going to be great. Well, the guy's clueless.
Right.
And, Shea Patterson is a pedestrian quarterback who would have gotten beaten out at Ole Miss. And listen, I blame myself because I looked at Harbaugh and I said, he did it with the 49ers. He beat Pete Carroll as a 40-point underdog. He'll do it again. No, he's not. He's not doing it again.
It's one of those situations. This is my last point about Jim Harbaugh. It's literally gone to, this is a man that first of all, he was a developer of quarterbacks because you looked at what he did transitioning from Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick. He guided the San Francisco 49ers to a Super Bowl where he lost to his brother, John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens, but they came back with a fierce second half effort, no doubt about it. Can't take anything away from them. But he's regressed from that to a point right now, I really believe he would have a hard time getting a job if he were to lose the Michigan job.
I agree. And by the way, he probably should have been to 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I was talking
they lost to the Giants in an NFC Championship game one year. That's
I was talking to an NFL guy today, so I think Jim could still get a job in the NFL. Where? What? Selling concessions at the stadium? I mean, Stephen A., you know the NFL. They're not hiring Jim Harbaugh right now. And you can say, well, they hired Freddie Kitchens. Okay, well, Freddie Kitchens at least was ascending. May not be for long.
Right.
But Harbaugh is I mean, he's a beaten down stock price that nobody wants anything to do with, and I don't enjoy beating the guy up. I mean, I've tried to like him in a perverted, maybe that's the wrong word, but I don't know how you can't like him normally.
Yeah.
And I think he's if you're a recruit and you're looking at Georgia and Clemson and Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan, are you kidding? Why would you go there?
Not at all. Not at all.
Unless you're Desmond Howard's son, you're not going there.
Can't knock you one bit. Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. While I got you on this subject, you're right here in New York City with me right now. Daniel Jones, former quarterback at Duke, shows up in his first game, a rookie, as a starter for the New York Giants. Plays lights out. Incredibly impressive. Against Tampa Bay, what did you see from his performance? How shocked were you by it? And what does it say to you about him, particularly in comparison to Dwayne Haskins, who folks in the nation's capital were clamoring for last night while the Chicago Bears were running their team out of the district?
I mean, I was with Jeremy Fowler earlier today on a show, and he said, the Redskins are going to be patient. For what reason? What's there to be patient about with Jay Gruden? I was surprised, and Steve and I liked what you said this week. No reason to apologize to anyone right now because we think he's going to be a star. I'm reading the Post today, and he's already won New York. It takes a while, but you don't do what he did if you don't have enormous talent. And I think he always had that. It was just a matter of fitting in and supplanting Eli Manning. And I live about a mile from where he went to high school in Charlotte, and I've talked to people, and they say, yeah, he was a good quarterback, but no one saw this. This isn't a guy you saw in the 10th grade and go, oh, he's going to be the starter for the New York Giants in 5 years. He was average to pedestrian most of his career at Duke. He did well his final year. I heard another analyst today, well, he's part of the David Cutcliffe tree. Oh, well, so was Eli Manning. So that does not matter, but he has an innate ability to perform on a big stage, like I saw Kyle Allen do the same thing in Arizona the other day. I saw him 4 years ago, and he looked like a can't-miss player when he beat out Kyler Murray, and then he flamed out too.
Right, but what are we to make of one game though? See, I'm looking at Tampa. They transitioned from the Tampa 2 to cover 2 to the Todd Bowles 3-4 defense. They're going to blitz you all day long. Marcus Spears was explaining to me that how complicated that is to figure out. So you're looking at him read and go through his progressions, etc. And his placement of the football can't be denied, etc. I'm still of the mindset it was impressive. He deserves a lot of kudos. He does. A lot of points. But it was one game. Yeah. One game.
Yeah, I haven't run into Dave Gettleman. I'm not apologizing to him.
Exactly.
Because I don't blame anyone in New York. New York needs a hero. You live here. This is your city. Right. I mean, but the New York.
And it stinks. Football stinks here right now, and it has stuff for the last few years. You can't say that, but I will, Paul.
Well, I can. But
you can, but I'll do it for you.
Yeah, I dropped $2 on a New York Post today because I was curious with the back page. They're trying to sell papers. They're a newspaper. What are they going to put on the back cover?
That's right.
Sam Darnold with a mask on.
Ain't gonna happen.
I mean. I have no problem with what anyone has said, but let's calm down here. I agree with you, Stephen. Everyone falling over backwards and then running what everyone said on draft night. It's one game, and it's impressive. One game.
Having said all of that, do you think Daniel Jones, and I know it's two different situations, but do you think Daniel Jones' situation somehow influenced Jay Gruden in the nation's capital when it comes to taking a look at Dwayne Haskins? In light of the fact that Dwayne Haskins last seen was throwing 50 touchdowns for the Ohio State?
You have to. I mean, would you start Case Keenum after last night? No, I mean, you
fumbles, 2 fumbles, 3 interceptions? No. But Jay Gruden's determined to start him.
Well, good. And next year, when he's an analyst somewhere, he can think back on what a great decision that was.
How about that, right?
I mean, he's not surviving, and I frankly think putting in Haskins is essential. I mean, the season's over for the Redskins. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Before we get into something else involving the NCAA, I wanted to ask you: Notre Dame put up a better fight against Georgia, came down to the wire, put up a better fight against Georgia than I think you even anticipated, Paul Finebaum. What happened?
Stephen, I mean, Brian Kelly's about the last guy I want to say, you know what, you were right, you did a good job, because he can be obstinate, but he had his team ready to play. That atmosphere was as difficult as I have seen, as electric as I have seen in a long time of covering college football. And his team had a shot at winning. That's all you can hope for. You can quibble about Kirby Smart in Georgia. He's got more than a little bit of Nick Saban in him when it came to nursing a lead. But Notre Dame acquitted itself. I thought it would be a 2-touchdown game, maybe more. Their path now to the playoffs is not very good. But one game I thought they were going to lose, they're not going to, and that's against Michigan. So they are now really in a good spot. They had 2 brutally difficult games. They lost one, and I think they'll win the other one, and they just have to hope. But I still don't think they can make it.
Did the game tell you more about Georgia or Notre Dame?
It's a good question. I like Georgia, but I didn't think they quite lived up to the expectations. I still believe they are a complete football team, and if Alabama continues to lose defensive players, they could beat Alabama. But the SEC is confusing right now. LSU's the hot team. Don't forget about Auburn. They have 2 of the most impressive wins in college football this year, and a rookie quarterback. But I still like Georgia. I think the moment was just so overwhelming. I mean, I hate to sound like everybody, but these are young players, and that was a Super Bowl like scene.
Auburn just beat Texas A&M, correct?
Badly.
Now, looking at that, is it going to get to a point? How far are we, rather, from comparing Jimbo Fisher to Jim Harbaugh? In light of the expectations.
Good question. I was in
10 years, $75 million contract a couple of years ago.
I was in College Station Friday and Saturday and talked to him, and I thought this was one of the better coaches in the country, and he has just been made a fool out of twice this year, at Clemson and by Gus Malzahn Saturday at home. Stephen A. I mean, there's no excuse. I still never believed they could do better than 8-4 this season, considering they had the number 1, 2, and 3 teams actually they have the top 4 teams on their schedule with Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. I thought they would lose all 4, which is no crime, but they're going to lose. They're going to come out of this maybe 7-5, and next year Jimbo Fisher better show what he's all about, because with every loss by Jimbo Fisher, you have to objectively ask yourself, how responsible is he for what happened at Florida State?
Interesting point.
He left a mess there.
Paul, yeah, it is a mess. Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. I actually got to go down to Clemson October 11th. First Take is doing the show.
Oh, wow.
From Clemson.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Before they play Florida State. And, oh, by the way, I promised Dabo I would speak to the team. So I'll be speaking to the Clemson Tigers as well. So we'll see what happens.
This will be entertaining.
That will be absolutely. I owe them an apology because I kept picking against them when it came to Alabama, and Dabo keeps reminding me of that.
Do me a favor. If you see Trevor Lawrence, snap a picture of him.
Yeah, what's going on with him?
Because I don't know if we'll see him again this year, because they don't have anybody left to play that we'll be paying attention to.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I mean, they're going to be on milk cartons pretty soon.
So with that being said, how do you view the Heisman race unfolding in light of the fact that there's a level of competition that he's not going to face? Tua's doing his thing. There's no denying that. Plus, you got some other guys you're looking at as well.
I think Trevor will have a difficult time getting back in the Heisman because of what I just got through saying. He will not be in a meaningful game until December 28th, Stephen A. I mean, he can rack up big numbers, and he's off to kind of a shaky start in the games we watch. But I'm not going to watch this weekend. You're going to say, "Oh, well, let me plan my day around Clemson at North Carolina."
No,
nobody's watching them.
Nobody's watching.
So the Heisman right now is Joe Burrow, who was at Ohio State, played behind Haskins. He's the leader right now. Tua, I think, is going to be a finalist. Depends on how that game will knock out somebody. The winner of the Alabama LSU game, the loser is probably gone. Jalen Hurts is still a major contender.
Yes, and Jalen Hurts has looked absolutely spectacular. Do we look
Justin
at it? Do we look at that and praise Lincoln Riley? Do we look at that and say Jalen Hurts? I mean, this was a winner we just ignored. I mean, how do we look at it?
No, listen. I think Jalen was a good quarterback. He wasn't as good as he is now, but again, he's been around a long time, Stephen A. So, but Lincoln Riley is still the best quarterback coach out there. There's no doubt about that. And I just only wish I could represent Lincoln Riley because, man, are the offers going to start piling up at his house?
Here's my attitude. Doesn't Cliff Kingsbury help his cause tremendously? If Cliff Kingsbury can get a job and he's got a below 500 record as a college coach just because he got relationships with some quarterbacks, here's a guy in Lincoln Riley that's produced the last 2 Heisman Trophy winners, and it might be 3 in a row before all is said.
He may not go to the Cowboys like I originally thought,
right.
But listen, Cowboys season has still got a long way to go. It's not over. Nobody's apologizing. I know you're not apologizing to anybody out there. And that's what people need to remember. I'm not trying to give a lesson here. Just let's stop this overreaction train every week. This is a long season in college and the NFL.
I want to transition. We're talking to Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Something very, very important came down over the last day or so. As first reported, Pat Forte, Pete Thamel, and Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports, the NCAA issued a notice of allegations against the University of Kansas basketball team. The men's basketball program was charged with 3 level 1 violations and lack of institutional control, which means that's Bill Self, the head coach, the future Hall of Fame head coach, as far as I'm concerned, for Kansas Jayhawks. This is a guy that's going to have a responsibility charge aimed in his direction. You cover college sports, you cover college football, you know this stuff backwards and forwards. I wanted to get your thoughts about the charges leveled against Kansas's program, and more importantly, what you think when you hear responsibility charges or lack of institutional control. What does that mean to Paul Finebaum, knowing college sports the way that you do?
That means the NCAA is saying, we want you out. You can find lesser charges. You can avoid the coach. You can blame anyone you want. I mean, the NCAA makes it up as they go along. They are saying, we think your coach is a cheater, and when this is all over, you should fire him if you know what's good for you. Now, again, everybody has a right to defend themselves.
Right. And in fairness to Bill Self, he has defended himself through his lawyers and stuff. He says, notice that they did not implicate him. They didn't say he knew anything. No. They didn't say he was involved, but nevertheless, they're holding him.
It's important to remember Jeff Long is the athletic director of Kansas. He came from Arkansas. He's been around a long time. And I say that because this isn't someone who's a long-time Kansas rock chalk Jayhawk guy who knows Bill Self very well. He probably knows him, but he has no allegiance to him. I think Bill Self, when this is all adjudicated, will be done. I mean, he'll fight a vigorous fight. He'll act like he had no idea. He'll call Rick Pitino and say, "Okay."
I was getting ready to say, "Is this the second coming of Rick Pitino?"
He said, "How did you do it? Give me your lawyer's name." But this is a result of what happened down the street here in this trial last year and the year before. And this, it's not over yet.
That FBI probe where assistant coaches got arrested and indicted, some incarcerated as well.
You still have there's some big time program, but Kansas is the biggest. I mean,
right.
It's one of the biggest programs in history. I mean, basketball was invented out there, and I don't. I mean, short of winning the title this year, which can always make you friends in the administration building, I would be shocked if Bill Self were coaching there a year from today.
You're a pundit as well as a reporter extraordinaire, a commentator extraordinaire. This is what you do. You give us perspective, not just information. From your perspective, the Patinos of the world, the Bill Selfs of the world, the believability factor is what? And I only ask that question and preface that question by saying, usually we automatically assume they're guilty.
Right.
But it's the NCAA. And because it's the NCAA, there's so many cynics and skeptics out there aimed in their direction. It's actually plausible that some believability should be aimed in your direction because of how they can be. To that you say.
And there's a feeling that the NCAA really doesn't care what happens. And now they are just trying to make an example because they were made to look really stupid in this trial. But the problem with college basketball, Stephen A., is there's no amateurism. It's the Wild West, and nobody expects to get caught because the NCAA is not really trying to. The NCAA could not do this on their own. 30 years ago, when you were a reporter, we had some faith in the NCAA enforcement. They now just follow Twitter to see where the next scandal breaks, where Yahoo or ESPN are outside the lines. They have no. So I mean, they're depending entirely on the FBI, and they're depending entirely on the trial. So with that, they have a case, but they couldn't have come up with this case on their own. And what Bill Self is going to argue, listen, I mean, they're trying to make an example out of me. It sounds like every crook in federal court, except in his case, he is going to be the poster child.
Yeah, and then that's not going to stop them from dropping some sanctions down in their direction.
But there's cheating. Cheating is rampant. I asked a head coach in a major Power 5 league a couple of months ago. We were at an event late at night, and I said, how much cheating goes on? He said, about 75% of the head coaches cheat.
Wow. And by cheating, that means what?
That means ginning the system, using middlemen, pushing the envelope. We're not talking about Brinkstrup, where 40 years ago you dropped off cash. No. I mean, there are a million ways to buy a player, but nowadays it's obvious the way you do it. You have middlemen who represent the footwear companies.
Mm-hmm. Are you a proponent? Remember when Condoleezza Rice and her group came down with this notion of essentially players, talk about 1 year eligibility, their eligibility. I'm a bit foggy with it now because Rich Paul and others were involved, and because they felt like it was handcuffing the agents and castigating them to some degree. But I was thinking more of the case where the state of California, Gavin Newsom was talking about you can profit off of your likeness, you can profit off of your own marketability, et cetera. Were you a proponent of that?
I wasn't early on, but I am now.
Why?
Because I just think it doesn't solve the problem we're talking about, but it does continue to give freedom to the athletes. And I know we're with the Bill Self thing, we're getting very close to the line. And I've had people that cover this on a daily basis say, don't be so outraged. It's all dirty. Everyone's doing it. The NCAA doesn't really even care. But that's not really the way college athletics ought to be run. Right. And that's why I do think Bill Self will go down, and he'll probably go down for a lot of other people who have been cheating. He just happens to be one of the biggest names in the industry.
Wow. Paul Finebaum, always appreciate you, buddy. You can catch his show. It's coming up at the top of the hour, the Paul Finebaum Show. Make sure you don't miss it. Paul Finebaum, the great Paul Finebaum, right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. More to Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio in a minute. By the way, do you have frequent heartburn? Like the kind where you have antacids stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I'm talking about. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. This